He has 5 receivers due to start this week, heading into week 15 in your semifinal games. The first guy's T.Y. Hilton, the Indianapolis Colts. T.Y. Hilton, he finally got back on track the last few weeks, like after he looked on and like a total bust this season. Now he's got 3 games in a row over double-digit fantasy points. And this week he's got a good matchup versus the Houston Texans that Hilton's owned in his career. And week 13 he owned them again with 8 catches, 110 yards, and a touchdown. Then last week at Vegas, 5 catches, 86 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And this week he's got Houston again, like I said. Him and Phillip Rivers are finally on the same page, it seems like. And like I said, Hilton with his great track record versus Houston. This guy, he's a must-start as your number 2 receiver or flex option this week. So he's the first start. The second guy is Robbie Anderson of the Carolina Panthers. Anderson, he's been a great fantasy player and a good receiver this season for the Teddy Bridgewater and the Panthers and versus the Green Bay Packers, where this game I could see them trailing. This is a Saturday game. The Panthers at Green Bay, 8:15 start, so a primetime game. Anderson, he's only failed to reach double-digit fantasy points twice this season. So this is a good matchup for him. Last week, 17.7 fantasy points. He had 8 catches, 84 yards, and 2 rushes for 13 yards. So Anderson, he's going to get good looks. I know Moore's back, but Anderson, he's the number 1 receiver over there in Carolina, in my opinion. Now, I think he could get 15 to 20 fantasy points for your teams. The third wide receiver I would start this week's Chase Claypool of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Claypool, he's been struggling the last few weeks. I don't know if he's hit a rookie wall or he's banged up a little, whatever the case may be. But this week, I think he bounces back in a big way versus the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that he had a great game against in Week 10 with 4 catches, 56 yards, and 2 touchdowns was Claypool. The last 2 weeks, he's taken a step back, like I said, with only 10 targets in the last 2 games. But I think he bounces back and he has 50 or 60 total yards and a touchdown. This game's prime time, Monday Night Football, and I think Claypool has a prime type of game and a big one to help your teams. The fourth wide receiver I would start this week's Brandon Ayuk of the San Francisco 49ers. He looks like the last man standing over there for the Frisco 49ers at wide receiver, and Ayuk's had 2 back-to-back huge games now. In Week 13, 5 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown. Then last week versus Washington, 10 catches, 119 yards on a whopping 16 targets. And this week he's got an amazing matchup versus the Dallas Cowboys that give up the 7th most fantasy points to wide receivers. Dallas, they can't stop anybody at receiver or running back. To be honest, Dallas gives up a tons of points. Players have huge games versus them each and every week. And this week, I think Ayuk could easily get over that 100-yard barrier once again and find the end zone. And the 5th and final receiver, I would start this week's Corey Davis of the Tennessee Titans. Davis, he finally had a dud performance last week, but I think it was just a hiccup in the road because Henry, he rushed for 215 yards, so they just kept feeding him, was Tennessee. And this week, I think he has a big game versus the Detroit Lions that give up the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers. We saw the potential that he could have, Davis, in Week 13 versus Cleveland. He went for a crazy 11-catch, 182-yard game and a touchdown. And this week versus Detroit, I think he could get 75 to 90 yards and find the end zone and have a big game to help you win your matchup. So that's 5 wide receivers I would start this week heading into Week 15.